Brisbane is hosting the 2032 Olympic Games, and the assumption across the property world is simple. Olympics equals infrastructure, infrastructure equals growth, growth equals guaranteed profit. So just buy Brisbane and wait. But the actual history of Olympic host cities tells a much more complicated story. Today we examine whether Brisbane's Olympic property boom is the sure thing everyone believes, or a trap waiting for late investors. Let's start with the seductive logic, because it is not entirely wrong. Hosting an Olympics brings enormous infrastructure investment. New transport links, upgraded venues, improved public spaces, and a global spotlight on the city. Brisbane has already seen strong property growth in recent years, with prices in many suburbs rising substantially, partly fueled by exactly this Olympic optimism plus heavy interstate migration. So there is genuine substance here. The question is not whether the Olympics matter. The question is whether the benefit has already been priced in. And this is where history becomes essential. Look at past Olympic host cities and a clear pattern emerges. The biggest property gains almost always happen in the years when the city is announced and when the major infrastructure is being planned and built. By the time the games actually arrive, much of the growth has already occurred. Investors who buy early, right after the announcement, tend to do well. Investors who pile in during the final couple of years before the games, when the excitement peaks and the headlines are loudest, often buy at or near the top. Brisbane was awarded the games years ago. The announcement surge has already happened. That is the first warning sign for anyone thinking about buying now purely on Olympic hype. The second issue is that not all Olympic infrastructure actually adds long-term property value. Some of it does. A new train line that permanently improves how people move around the city genuinely lifts the value of suburbs along its route, and that benefit lasts for decades. But other Olympic spending creates facilities that have limited use after the games end. A specialized sporting venue might be impressive, but if it sits underused for 50 weeks a year afterwards, it does little for surrounding property values. The smart investor distinguishes between transformational infrastructure, which permanently changes how a city works, and event infrastructure, which serves the games and then fades in relevance. The third issue is the risk of oversupply. In the lead up to a major event, developers rush to build. Apartment towers, hotels, and new estates all race to be ready for the influx of visitors and the expected demand. But here is the trap. Much of that demand is temporary. The athletes leave, the tourists go home, and the city can be left with a glut of new dwellings that were built for a moment rather than for sustained local need. That oversupply can weigh on prices for years after the games, exactly the opposite of what optimistic investors expected. So where does this leave Brisbane specifically? The market has already run hard. Prices have risen substantially over recent years. Rental yields have compressed as a result, meaning the income return for new investors is thinner than it was. Affordability, once Brisbane's great advantage over Sydney and Melbourne, is no longer the standout feature it used to be. This does not mean Brisbane is a bad city or that prices will fall. It means the easy, obvious gains have largely been captured, and buying now expecting another effortless surge is a much riskier bet than it was 5 years ago. Let's talk about which areas carry the most risk. The highest risk sits in the segments where the most speculative, event-driven building is concentrated. New apartment towers marketed heavily to investors on the Olympic story are exactly the kind of stock that can face oversupply after the games. By contrast, established houses in well-located suburbs with genuine long-term appeal, close to jobs and the permanent transport upgrades, rest on much firmer foundations. As always in property, the speculative segment carries the danger, while quality and genuine scarcity provide protection. So how should a sensible investor approach Brisbane and the Olympics? 3 principles. First, do not buy on the Olympic story alone. Buy because the specific property has strong fundamentals that would make sense even if there were no games at all. The Olympics should be a bonus, not the entire thesis. Second, follow the permanent infrastructure, not the temporary venues. If a new transport line is genuinely going to reshape how a suburb connects to the city, that is a durable reason to be interested. Third, be especially cautious about brand new investor-grade apartments sold on Olympic hype, because that is precisely where post-games oversupply tends to bite hardest. Brisbane is a fine city with real long-term potential. But the idea that the Olympics guarantee easy property profits is exactly the kind of simple story that leads late investors into trouble. The gains from the announcement have already happened. The risk now is paying a premium for hype that history suggests is already baked into the price. Invest in Brisbane if the fundamentals stack up. Just do not let 5 rings on a flag do your thinking for you. If you found this useful, hit subscribe, because we break down a different Australian property market every few days. See you in the next one. It is worth looking at what tends to happen to host cities in the years immediately after the games, because that period is rarely discussed during the excitement. Once the closing ceremony ends, the temporary boost to the local economy fades. The construction jobs finish. The visitor surge disappears. The global spotlight moves on to the next host. Cities that built genuine, lasting infrastructure and had strong underlying fundamentals continue to do well. Cities that overbuilt for the event, or relied too heavily on the temporary excitement, can experience a hangover, with surplus dwellings and softer demand. For Brisbane, the key question is whether the investment being made will still be useful and valuable in the decades after 2032, or whether some of it is being built for a single month that will never come again.